I like the idea of running it to a hearing aid because sometimes I have this
Yeah,
mic and then sometimes I get the feedback back on the audio. So I have to think about maybe doing
right.
it through a hearing aid
Yeah,
so that that's a
yeah,
brilliant idea.
yeah, yeah. It took me the better part of 6 months to figure out how to connect the hearing aid to it. But I called the audiologist that prescribed them, or that filled the prescription, I guess. And she's like, here, click here, click here, click here, click here, boom, boom, boom. I was like, oh, that was genius. And then I've been working on this for months. She's like, why didn't you call me? I said, oh, yeah, that would have been the smart thing to do, huh?
I love that idea because, most people wear the headphones so that,
Right.
but that's not very nice. And just a hearing aid would be far better. If it's a,
Yeah, yeah,
if it's the earphones, it just looks so contrived. It doesn't look
right,
like what it really is, which is,
right, exactly.
yeah, I
I
am
agree.
so happy to meet you. I've read your
Yeah, it's like
blogs
face to face.
yeah, for a long time. I've been following your blogs and you just are consistently, I don't know where you get the vocabulary, how you put sentences together. I don't know how, and
Okay.
I don't know how you just churn out as much as you churn out. But I've been asked many times, can we interview you or can we tell your story or will you tell your story? And I thought, no, nope, nope, nope. And then I'm following you and I'm listening to you and you really get the Gogi thing. You get it. So I thought, you know what? I will tell my story to JT because I bet you anything that he's going to be able to put the words in the way that I would want to read them. So
Okay.
I am so grateful that you were willing to kind of ask me questions
Yeah.
and I printed them out. My gosh, you were so organized. Section one, my life before Gogi. Section two, the birth of Gogi. It is just section three, the
Yeah.
Gogi life tools. Oh my gosh. I mean, we could be here for days with all these
Oh, I
sections
know.
that you've done, but we'll get through as many of them as
All
possible.
right.
And I'm just very, very excited about our time together.
Me too. I'm glad to meet you. We've talked for over a year now. I looked it up. I had to go back dig through my email of our first conversations and catch a fire and stuff. And I was like, we've been at this for a year and we've never met. It's so weird.
Are you in New York?
I am in Iowa.
In Iowa. Well, chances
Yes.
are we aren't going to be meeting because I don't have anything in Iowa yet. Hopefully, we'll have
But
Gogi in Iowa.
I just say we're actually going to talk about that because as a result of a blog that I wrote about Gogi, the director of the Department of Corrections reached out to me last week
Oh,
and said,
wow.
would you consider coming to Des Moines and talking to me about Gogi? Just tell me about it. I will reach out to the creator, but I want to talk to you and see if you're really as passionate about it as it sounds in writing. And I said, I
See,
am,
and
probably more so, because I hold back. I
yeah,
was like, wow.
that's why I'm willing to answer these questions because you get it. You totally,
Yeah,
completely get it. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. So, what I
well,
thought
thank you.
was, somebody said, well, we need something written down about you, coach. And I thought, ugh, those little bios are so annoying.
Yeah,
And besides, most of our population is watching this on a tablet or on YouTube. So why not put a face to it? We can always translate it down into words, but why not have a conversation that we could share with 400 prisons and jails and hundreds of
right,
thousands of
exactly.
incarcerated people doing Gogi? So
I
that's
love
why
that.
I asked you. And so I'm
Great.
here and I'm just going to answer any question that you ask of me.
Okay. Okay. Well, are you ready? Oh.
For you, yes. For others,
All
maybe
right.
not so.
Maybe not so much. All right. I appreciate that. Thank you. First, before Gogi existed, who was Mara Lee? Who was that
um,
person?
I could define myself as uh, lifelong depression, a never feeling heard, feeling special, but not in a good way,
Okay.
feeling um, like I didn't really want to be on this earth. By the time I kind of transitioned to the world of Gogi, I was a single mother, didn't know why I had been left on Christmas Eve, Didn't know why my family had no concept of my suffering. It was really bad. I'll tell you one quick story. As a young child, I would go to school and come home, and I would go to school and I was extremely likable. I had a lot of friends, very socially active, and I would come home and go into my room, close my door, and go into my closet, curl up in a ball, and cry.
Oh,
The world seemed fake to me. Nothing seemed real. And it wasn't until that first prison tour that something looked like how I felt.
that's what had to not be such a great feeling at all. To walk into a
No.
prison and say, "Oh, here it is, I'm home," kind of thing.
Well,
That aha moment.
it was an epiphany. It
Wow.
was I was way into my 40s. Yeah, I was 40s at the time, and we took it. I went back to school, single motherhood. I thought I've got to
Mhm.
figure out something. So I went back to school for psychology. We took a tour of a prison. And the moment that big door, and anybody who's sitting in an 8 foot cell and a 2 inch mattress will know the sound the very first time that door slams behind you, the finality, the containment, the oppression from that clang, it
Yeah.
reverberated through my body. I was the last one next to the door. And when I looked up and saw the yard, it was like I had an epiphany. The prison looked like how I felt. And what the biggest thing that came over me was, you're home. And then I thought, that's really messed up. That's
Right.
really messed up.
Right.
But
That's not some.
it was a lightning bolt of, you're home. It looked like how I felt. And that's when the Gogi journey began.
Wow. Well, first, I'm sorry that felt like home because you're right. That door, as you put it, clanging shut behind you, it rattles you to the bones the first time. It just you feel it to your bones. It's like you realize it's really final. You're not turning around to go back to McDonald's, you
Right.
know.
Right.
So, all right. So, have you always felt drawn to helping people heal or getting systems in place to help people heal? Has that always been part of you? And you just identified it when you went into prison the first time?
Absolutely not. I
Okay.
I helped little animals that were injured. So we lived near a desert. So if there was a lizard that had its tail missing, or a rabbit that got pinched, I remember a little rabbit got his hind leg hurt. I always had a compassion for animals, but people, not so much. I perceive them to be more like the enemy. Not that I had a terrible childhood. I didn't experience any abuse except maybe just being ignored, which in and of itself is a certain level of abuse. I didn't
Yeah.
want to help anybody because I was helpless. I couldn't help anyone because I was hopeless. There was nothing in me that could make the world a better place for anybody because my world sucked. It wasn't until way into the Gogi journey when I was so desperate. Desperation led me to ask questions of the prisoners. And that's when I thought, they have the answers. They're helping me. And then when I started regurgitating some of the psychology jargon back to them when I would meet with them every week, it wasn't until then that I thought, oh, I can help them. I can help them. Wow, they're helping me, and this feels good for everybody. Maybe service sets us free. And that's how the journey began.
That's incredible. Well, I'm glad you started asking questions and have gotten Gogi to where it's at today, which we'll get to a little further down the line here. What were some of the early beliefs? You kind of touched on them just now when you answered that question. What were some of the early beliefs that you had about change and whether or not people could genuinely change?
Oh, I knew change was impossible. No, I
Right.
absolutely, from day one out of the womb until I walked through that prison door and the door slammed, absolutely change was never possible. Cards were dealt against me. I was a black sheep that nobody wanted to listen to, that had nothing to say, that was my prison sentence was profound, and no one could tell me anything different, period. End of story. Full stop.
Right. That's harsh. Harsh, harsh, harsh. And what do you think now about change?
It can happen in a split second. It can happen with one silly GOGI life tool. It can happen with one conversation. It can happen when one individual reaches out and says, I see something special in you. It can happen just in a dream. It can happen by putting on a new pair of shoes. Change is so easy because we control it. We control every aspect of the change process. It is all within us. There is nothing that is needed outside of us. We could sit in an 8-foot cell for the rest of our life and we could still feel a sense of freedom that most people on the outside don't feel.
That's that's somewhat profound because people, I think in general, people think that you're kind of dealt the deal, the cards you're dealt in the beginning, and you're stuck with them. They don't understand you can shuffle them back in the deck and get some new cards out with some work. So I think that's, like I said, that borders on profound to me that you came to that realization walking into the prison,
Well,
and that's amazing.
people always said, oh, he has a calling. This is his calling. This is an epiphany. And yeah, right.
Yeah,
Epiphany, this, calling that. It's all BS. It's to try to get
yeah,
some leverage and some power. But I'm telling you, JT, when I walked through that prison, that final door at Terminal Island Federal Prison in San Pedro, California, when I walked through that final door and it slammed behind me, and the reverberation, it was like a lightning bolt. Every cell of my body resonated with familiarity. Every cell of my body said, you're home. Every cell of my body. And I've never felt it again. But I felt it then and I know what it feels like. It was a reverberation of truth. And when we find a passion, when we find something that we, oh, wow, I love that, we feel that sensation of knowing. It's a knowing that this is a little stream that if I enter that stream and I sit on the little rubber tube, I might have a fun ride. And so that was that moment that I decided to hop on that inner tube on that little lazy river.
nice. I'm going to ask you to reflect back to earlier in your life. Go back to about 24, 25 years old. If you could sit down next to younger you and say, hey, I know what the future holds, what would you tell yourself about
What
your
I
future?
needed to hear is, you are heard. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. And then I hear you again. Because so many of us don't feel heard. But we talk and people say they listen, but are you truly heard? Do you feel heard? Do you feel seen for who you are? I didn't know that. I was grasping for, well, what if I did this? And what if I then maybe I could feel like I belong here. All I needed to hear was that I hear you. I see you. You matter. You are important.
Why were those things so important to be seen, to be heard, to know that you were important to somebody other than you? And at that point, I'm guessing you weren't too important to you. Just talking about the depression you mentioned before. Why were those things so vital to you in your heart?
Well, I think we choose our life paths, and I think finding my voice for others who are not heard was just a little bit of my destiny. By being denied a sense of being heard, I realized how important it is. I realized that every voice matters and that the root of all of it is a sense of feeling loved and appreciated and acknowledged. And I didn't feel that. Not that I didn't have a loving family. They loved in their own way, but it wasn't the way I needed. I needed eye contact. I needed to be still. I needed to to have a dinner with one of my parents, just me and that person, rather than the hectic, chaotic nature I grew up. It was important to connect. That's why I like Zoom meetings that we can record rather than big speeches, because I feel like I can look you in the eyes and you and I connect. And so many of the incarcerated, well, so many humans don't feel heard. They don't even know what it's like to be heard. But once you get a taste of it, that it's, I want more of that. I want more of that.
That makes perfect sense to me. Um, when you went into the prison, excuse me, the very first time, and you knew you had a purpose to serve, not just to go hang out, not to question them for a psychology class, but to go in with that purpose that you felt in the core of your being, your soul. What was the difference between then and when you walked in there to ask questions for a psych class?
Very, very interesting. Psych class is let's have a tour of a prison. You can see the population that you might end up working with should you choose to go on with your education. It was a master's degree. So the tour was just this is what a prison looks like, and this is what my professor did as a drug treatment counselor. That was just me raising my hand because the time slot of the prison fit between dropping my daughter off at daycare and picking her up. And I think we were given 100 extra points. So it was a lark. It was just kind of like, okay, where is Terminal Island? That sounds terrible. Prison, all of that was just a lark. When I got there and it looked like how I felt, that's when the desperation turned into absolute obsession with finding the answer. I had to stay in prison. I had to stay there because I knew they had the key. I knew that in the confines of that, in the confines of that block square building with these housing units, with the razor wire, with the brick, with the guard towers, with the guards, with the doors. I knew I was going to find my freedom. I just knew it. I knew it. So it turned from my desperation was heightened. And then this drive and absolute commitment. I've got to stay inside this place and figure freedom out.
When you mentioned you had during that first visit, you said hi to some inmates. Um, and I always go back and forth, and I should have asked this earlier. Do you prefer inmate, incarcerated person? What vernacular do you use when you're talking about the guys that you work with?
Well, here's an interesting thing. When somebody has, let's say, killed somebody, and by the way, most offenses are done when somebody is alcohol or drug related. So most crimes are committed when people are not in their right mind. They are in some way medicated, self-medicated, or intoxicated. I just as an aside, I believe that if everybody was sober, our prisons would be emptied. But that's my own my own approach to if we want to empty prisons out, just get everybody sober and would be good.
Good to
So if
go.
a man, a gang member, has killed their girlfriend's side thing,
Hmm.
there is a part of that person that feels remorse, that feels that they know they did something wrong. And working through that rehabilitation, forgiveness, all redemption, all of that is a long process. To deny that process is to deny them the full aspect of healing. So when you say justice impacted person, well, so is a guard, so is the psychologist, so am I as a volunteer. But if a man has taken the life of somebody else or under a DUI, if 3 people were killed, if I did that to call me justice impacted, actually, I was impacted by my alcohol. I was impacted by my gang affiliation. I was impacted by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's denying that person the possibility of full redemption and full healing. A
Love that.
prisoner can be a prisoner of their own mind, a prisoner of alcohol. A prisoner is a label that allows you to look within for the freedom. So they're now the buzzword is, oh, it's a justice impacted person. Okay, but are they an addict? Are they a gang member? Were they high? Were they, it's for me, and there's many other opinions. Justice impacted is a more fair title, but it does not allow the person to address the root cause of why they're in there in the first place. So GOGI prisoners are GOGI students. They are students. The GOGI
Okay.
inmates, they are students. The GOGI prisoners, they're students. The GOGI injustice impacted people, they're
That's
students. I remember
perfect.
at the Los Angeles County Jail, I was asked to create a GOGI module. And they said, well, we want you to do this module. We've read your GOGI books. We like the idea. We need something. And I said, okay, I'll do it on several conditions. And they said, what? I said, you don't call them inmates, you call them students. And they said, you can call them whatever you want. They're inmates to us, call them students. I said, okay, they're students. Call the pod a campus. You can't call it a pod. It's not a module, it's a campus. We are going to be full immersion learning GOGI, and we are students, and this is GOGI campus, and they're going to graduate. And I want a graduation. Grady Macknick, who was then the sergeant of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, and Roel Garcia, who was at that time a deputy, who's now a commander, and they're still running GOGI, by the way, there. They agreed that under those conditions, they would let it happen. That when you gave somebody else, you didn't take away the inmate title because they were there for a reason, but you gave them something else that they could earn, something else that they could create, something else that was theirs. They were, in this case, a GOGI girl. They were a GOGI student in a GOGI campus. Yes, they were an inmate. They might have been going to prison, probably were going to lose their children, had bad addiction they were dealing with, but they were a GOGI student at a GOGI campus, and they were going to create that environment.
That rocks. I love that. When you reflect on some of those early conversations, is there one particular conversation that really has clung with you or stuck with you since that day?
Oh, GT, it's been 25 years of those conversations. Every one of the
Okay.
tools, and there are a dozen of them, every one of them was brought to GOGI by a prisoner, a GOGI student who was in prison. Every single tool, from Boss of My Brain to Ultimate Freedom, every single one. And every single one, I remember the face of the individual who actually helped create that tool. I remember the setting. I remember everything about it. So it's been 25 years of the most profound conversations and illuminations. And through the process of being of service, I found my own freedom, and then I thought, oh, I'll go in, I'll fix the prison system a little bit. I'll be out in a couple of years. This is easy. 25 years later, I'm going strong. I'm, sti- I'm still at it. You can't get me out of prison. I'm LWOP, life without
Life without.
possibility.
I love that. I love that. Um, the phrase "getting out by going in" is kind of a paradox because in order, to get freedom, you have to get locked up. In this case, what did it mean to you then when you came up with that versus what does it mean now?
Oh,
Does it still have
interesting.
the same powerful
Yeah,
impact?
interesting. I was sitting at Terminal Island on the floor in the chapel slash basketball court slash everything else. And one of
Yes.
the guys said, damn, coach, what you're telling me is to get out of prison, I got to go inside. And then the guy next to him said, yeah, getting out by going in. And then a guy across the way said, ha, Gogi. And that's how we got our name.
Oh wow, wow. That, I should have asked that long ago. That's a great story, actually. Was there ever a point early on where it got so frustrating or so overwhelming or so heavy on you, hearing some of the stories and dealing with people every day, that you almost threw in the towel and said, nah, I can't do this anymore, or no, this was a bad idea. Let me go back and reinvent the wheel. What kept you going in those early days? Because it had to be challenging.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. There wasn't a day in the 25-year journey where anyone in my family or my friends thought it was a good idea. I sacrificed, I don't know, everything, everything. Because when you immerse yourself so fully in that world, it's at the exclusion of everything else. The only thing that mattered to me was my daughter, making certain I was there for her in a way that I had not been experienced, and my education and my service. So that was my dilemma, and it was terrible. In 2002 there was no programming. 2025, there's lots of programming, but I had to wear steel-toed boots when I went into the prison and a gunny sack. When I first went into Pelican Bay State Prison and CCI level 4 prisons, I had to have a spit mask and a stab vest. And it was a very different environment that scared everyone but me. I was just so desperate for freedom that I would do anything. I would be on a yard with a riot that broke out. That happened more than once, simply because I was either going to find myself happy on earth or I didn't want to be here, and I was not going to stop until I did. So I remember one moment when I had come into the jail setting and there was a turn of administration and there was this woman that didn't like me at all. She was now in charge of programming at the jail. I walked into the clearance and they were doing shift change for the guards. I walked to start walking down the long hall and the whole line of guards turned their back on me. Turned their back on
Wow.
me. Here I am entering a high security jail setting, and they turn their back as if to say, "You're on your own, lady. If something goes down, we aren't going to be there for you. We don't want you here. We don't need you here." Now, things have changed. Now, our biggest advocates, I have officers, sergeants, wardens emailing me all the time, counselors saying, "Gogi's the best thing. Thank you for all the free material." But way back then, officers turned their back, and I thought, I'm screwed. If
Hey,
something happens, they're
wow.
going to let me be killed and say, "Oh, poor lady, wrong place, wrong time." There were so many instances where I was, um, it really took a lot to hang in there, JT.
Yeah.
It really
Okay.
took a lot.
That had to be that not only daunting and frustrating, but almost overwhelming and make you question whether or not do I want to go back tomorrow or next week. I mean, seriously, wow. You mentioned that there's multiple Gogi tools. What single one of them speaks to you personally the loudest when you go through your list that you and your um, individuals have come up with?
Well, the final tool is ultimate freedom. Being free is up to me. Service sets me free. So every day I wake up, how can I personally make the world a better place? Is it by making sure my bed is clean, my clothes are clean? Is it by making a cup of coffee for someone in the office and just surprising them? Is it placing a phone call? I really, really try my best to get out of my own head and my own troubles, my own worries, and I try to be of service every day. With that mindset, there's no depression, there's no anxiety because I'm just waking up. How can I make the world a better place? Not on a big scale like, "Oh, let me call Oprah." No, it's
Right.
the smaller moment by moment little things we do with individuals within 3 feet of where we are. That's where we make the profound service agreement that sets us free. It's not big stuff. It's not founding a nonprofit. It's not making millions of dollars so you can give it to some philanthropic effort. It's how do you react when you pick up the phone? When somebody irritates you, how do you treat them? When you're on with customer service, how do you respond to that person who's getting paid next to nothing and is frustrated? The last thing they want to be is on a customer service line. Do they really need you to be impatient? Or might it be of service to say, "I hope you have a good day. Thank you so much for helping me." So, being aware of the positive impact that you can have on every little thing around you, that's where my freedom is. And that's why today and every day I utilize all the tools, but ultimate freedom is the driver.
I love that. It reminds me of my late grandfather. He said, in life, your mission is two things a day. Make one person smile that's not smiling when you cross paths with them, and change one thing in the world that's going to make it better for your children and me at the same time.
See, that's
And
he was Gogi before there was Gogi. That's
right,
that's why I
exactly.
want this conversation with you because
Yes,
you get it, JT. You get it.
yeah. And every day we would come home from school. He's like, okay, who did you make smile? And what did you change? Have you changed anything yet? You got until the sun goes down. And by sundown, you better tell him something you changed. or you were in trouble. He wasn't as nice as you are about it.
But I think he should get an honorary GOGI Coach badge because
Yeah,
that
I
is
think so.
exactly what we do.
Yes.
G-O-G-I, G-O-G-I. Yogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-G-I, G-O-G-I. Yogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-G-I, G-O-G-I. Yogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-G-I, G-O-G-I. Yogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-G-I, G-O-G-I. Yogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. Yogi!